This is Terrence Archer Banks with Information Age Financial Solutions, coming to you with an article from Business Insider about millennials. Now, millennials always get a lot of slack, and it's usually a lot of negative comments, but this one is actually putting things into a more understanding light that they're really not that much different than the other previous generations. And I like that because it gives a kind of more of a understanding approach instead of just putting everything on saying they're disrupting the way economy is. We live in different times, and especially as we continue to move on, the old way of doing things will not work. And with this report shows that the principles of people who want to be able to, eventually have a family, what they quoted millennials not wanting to have or not purchasing homes yet, it's not because they don't want to, it's because they really don't have the capital. And this article really goes into depth about that. So I'm going to dive right in. As always, I'm going to put a link inside the description. Millennials' habits are threatening countless industries, but a new report says only because they're poorer than their parents. I'm glad they pointed that out, because it's just millennials are dramatically financially worse off than older generations who are at similar ages. A new study found out by Deloitte has found millennial spending is the same as their parents when they're young. When it comes to the proportion of income going to things such as food, restaurants, and alcohol, they just have less money to spend. The study cited census data indicating that the net worth of American consumers under the age of 35 have fallen by more than a third since 1996. This is just giving more and more proof of the times that we're living in. Millions are spending more on non-discretionary expenses, with the cost of student debt growing by 160% from 2004 to 2017. This is phenomenal. It's ridiculous too. You punish people from getting education. A new study argues that millennials aren't actually different from Generation Xers or baby boomers in how they spend their money. They just have less money to spend. Millennials have been blamed for the murder of industries as varied as golf equipment makers and razor manufacturers, as sales have tumbled in recent years. They're often branded as being more narcissistic, more idealistic, more socially conscious, and more experience-oriented than any of their preceding generations. A Deloitte study published this week said they have even been blamed for ruining everything from movies to marriage. The study written by Casey Loba, Bob Stems, and Jeff Simpson contradicts many of the narratives about millennial consumers. Deloitte's survey of more than 4,000 consumers, 450 billion points of location data, more than 200 billion credit card transactions, and government data, and concludes that millennials spend their money on roughly the same things that their parents did 30 years ago. Millennials, however, are dramatically financially worse off than older generations. This is why I keep making the point that why we keep doing the same things, that if they were in a financially worse position. That's why I'm glad articles like this are bringing things to light. The study cited census data indicating that the net worth of American consumers under the age of 35 has fallen by more than a third since 1996. The financial crisis and college debt, not avocado toast, are changing how millennials spend their money. That was an article about how millennials are spending money on avocado toast, which was ridiculous given the fact that most of the millennials don't even function in that particular paradigm. I'm not saying that some don't, and maybe they might spend their money a little. Some, probably a small few, which is in every generation, might spend their money a little frivolously. Pointing this out doesn't it? Really doesn't show the real means of where they're at in income-wise. Money spent on food, alcohol, and restaurants account for roughly the same percentage of millennials' income as their categories did for people at the same age in 1997. In other words, the study indicates millennials aren't skipping out on home ownership because they're wasting their money on avocado toast. Well said. In many ways, the consumer hasn't fundamentally changed, Laura Deloitte, principal and chief retail innovation officer, said in a statement. Instead, their behaviors have been triggered by a rise in non-discretionary expenses and the growing bifurcation between high and low income groups. Consumers as a whole spent 16% more on housing in 2017 than in 2007, the study said. Healthcare costs increased by 21% in the same period. Education spending skyrocketed by 65% amid soaring student debt. Since 2004, the cost of student debt has grown by 160%. And in all, 17% of 25 to 34-year-olds' income went toward these non-discretionary costs in 2017, compared with 12% in 1997. The rise in non-discretionary costs has hit lower income millennials especially hard. The bottom 40% of American consumers had less discretionary income in 2017 than they did a decade prior. It's worth repeating. The bottom 40% of American consumers had less discretionary income in 2017 than they did a decade prior, the study said. The next 40% didn't do much better, with only the top 20% seeing meaningful income gains. Comparing the growth in income over the period for a group of households making more than $100,000 with that of a group making less than $50,000 shows just how stark this difference is. The study said income growth for the higher income group from 2007 to 2017 rose by 1,305%, more than it did for the lower income group. Deloitte's conclusion echoes a 2008 study from the Federal Reserve that found millennials had fallen behind economically because they came of age during the financial crisis. Millennials are less well off than members of earlier generations when they were young, with lower earnings, fewer assets, and less wealth, the study said. Conditional on their age and other factors, millennials do not appear to have preferences for consumption that differ significantly from those of earlier generations. Average real labor earnings for male households heads working full time were 18% and 27% higher for Generation Xers and baby boomers when they were young compared with millennials. The study found for young women the difference was smaller, 12% for Generation Xers and 24% for boomers, but early generations were still making more money when they were young among similar demographics. Overall, the picture painted is one in which millennials have less money to spend than boomers and Generation Xers had when they were in the same age. With less money to spend, they're forced to be choosier. Certain purchases, such as a car or home, remain out of reach for many, forcing a further shift in how millennials spend their money. While millennials may be sending certain industries' sales into free fall, the Fed and Deloitte come to the same conclusion. The economy, I'm going to repeat this again, the economy, not the generation's personal preference, is to blame for millennials' killing spree. This article is definitely worth your time, especially if you find yourself as a millennial or finding yourself that you cannot do the situation what they've been broadcasting you can do like the other generations in the past. We live in a much different time. Everything is harder. If this video has been any value to you, please subscribe. And if you're around millennials, think of this article and try to change your mindset and see where their point of view is at. Until my next video, I'm out.